Hey everyone, welcome back to Notice That, an EMDR podcast. Jen and I are here with a special guest interview. But before we dive into that, hey Jen.
Hi.
How's it going?
Good. Just kind of coming out of the post-holiday fog of like a week away and then jumping back in, starting with podcast recording.
Yeah, it's going to be great. I'm very excited. We'll obviously get into this much more in the context of the episode, but the topic that this represents of working with couples, I know you and I talk a lot about that in our certification groups and in just general. I think we work with a lot of couples.
Yeah.
So how are you feeling about just like the topic today?
Well, super excited, especially coming out of the EMDR conference where we presented on enactment-focused EMDR, and it just feels like there's such a parallel and a connection towards our research and work around enactments and how that comes in and informs your process with EMDR. And then the author we get to talk to today has specifically worked on integrating that into the 8 phases and work with couples.
Yeah, I love it.
Yeah.
So without further ado, hi, Arilda.
Hi.
How are
Thanks
you?
for having me. I'm good.
Good.
I'm off recovering from Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
It was nice, but very, very busy. And I'm glad to get back into my usual routine. That's always nice.
Yeah,
Yes.
I love that. Well, I would love for you to just have a space to kind of introduce yourself to the listeners. You could talk about your book if you'd like, or just kind of what led you to this focus of working with couples in EMDR.
Sure. My name is Arilda Surridge, and I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm the owner and director of Wellness Counseling. I actually have the practice with my husband. He's also a licensed marriage and family therapist. We met in community mental health, and we opened our practice in 2015 in California.
Wow.
Moved to Seattle area. We live on Bainbridge Island, but we have our practice here in Bainbridge Island as well 5 years ago. So in February of 2020, and 2 weeks before everything shut down.
I was just going to say, what an interesting time.
It was an interesting time to move, but we survived, and we're still here 5 years later. And happy that we made the move from California up here. Let's see. So yes, so recently I did write this book, and I wrote the book because I was getting a lot of questions in regards to it also in like my consultation groups. Let me see, other colleagues were asking about it. They knew that I was incorporating or integrating couples work with EMDR already in my practice. And I was like, you know what, this seems like a need. I started researching it a little bit more. I read Jason Linder's article that he wrote. Also, I think last year is when or earlier this year was when Andrea also published something on EMDR and couples. And I was like, this seems like a good time, right, to like start getting like the word out, maybe training people. So I developed a training for treating couples with EMDR, but then I thought this very straightforward book, it doesn't have any fluffiness to it.
Right.
It's just very direct and to the point, which I think is what people needed, right? Because when they were trying to just to think about their work with couples, it just was not setting for them, right? So they needed practical tools to start implementing. Now, what I have in the book are just tools, right? But when you're actually sitting with a couple, depending on the couple and the unique needs, it can get very complex, but I can get into those complexities later in our discussion. And of course, you know, like me being a therapist, having a therapist husband, also he's EMDR trained as well. But so we're aware of our stuff, right? And how that influences how we react to one another. I was going to say respond, but responding is a lot different than reacting, right? So I was like, you know, like I noticed that my approach with couples, it's Gottman couples therapy, and I am EFT informed, but I had started noticing that for some couples, the tools were not enough, right?
Mm.
So they were finding themselves getting very emotionally dysregulated, despite me saying, reminding them about like resourcing and grounding tools. It was just not good for them. So that's when I started integrating EMDR into the work. I said, you know what, it seems like there's a lot of like historical stuff that is influencing your relationship. And if we're able to desensitize what's coming up for you, then I think it'll be so much easier to apply the tools that you are learning, whether it be Gottman approach or EFT or any other couples therapy approach, right? So the training that I do is not just based on Gottman couples therapy, but also it's just very general couples approach and considerations to take.
Yeah, that's really lovely. With the recognition of, the tools are not enough. I appreciate that language. What were you doing at that time of you're having these couples that are reacting to each other, they're getting dysregulated, and that's really defeating sort of the intended outcome that we're going for. So did EMDR come in and you then said, okay, let's refer to get some stabilization work done? Like before you had this integrated approach, what did that look like?
I was referring them for their individual work. So before, couples would come in to see me, and we're talking back in 2015, right? So my practice still in California. So I was already EMDR trained during that time, but I was still very newly trained, and so I didn't feel comfortable like even integrating EMDR then, and as the year started progressing, I'd say probably after certification, becoming a consultant and digging more into this, that's when I started, after the history taking, of course, or assessment process, I started recommending some couples, not all of them, right? But some couples that it seemed to be a good fit for EMDR within the couple's work, instead of me sending them to their own individual EMDR work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Bridger, this is making me kind of reflect back on a time. It was probably around 2020, 2019. You and I were running some couples retreats together, and it was a similar experience. And I remember looking to, research, articles, books, like, how do we integrate this more? We've got these couples here, and it's not just this individual work they need to do, but how do we bring this in more, and not finding a lot out there, and just kind of having to be like, well, we're going to just try stuff. Like, we're going to use this as an opportunity to get creative and try to bring in some new pieces, because there wasn't like a very clear, your book wasn't out there. There's not a lot of other trainings or published books that specifically walk you through, like, how do you do this? So it felt like a lot of trial and error at the time.
Mm-hmm. And I think that's okay. I mean, I know that we're not supposed to really like delve too far from, especially an evidence-based approach like EMDR, but what I make sure, right, to illustrate in the book is that we're not deviating from the fidelity of EMDR, right? So I am still going through all the phases that are needed, right, to make the EMDR process. And I have to always remind people that EMDR is not just a reprocessing, right? It's all the phases.
Right.
And I think people, when they get very excited or eager to do the work, they start rushing through all the phases before, especially 1, 2, and 3. And with couples, I mean, also with individuals, but especially with couples, we cannot rush through that. We have to take our time with them. You're not just working with one individual's traumas, but potentially two individuals' trauma. Yes, there's times where where it might seem like it's just one with the, distressing or traumatic experiences that are causing them to react. But then later on, you might learn that the other person is also carrying some stuff that is also influencing how they're reacting to their partner. And I'm going to close my blinds here
No
because
worries.
it's decided to peep out. Okay.
Well, I would really love to hear we talked earlier about maybe a case example or starting with introducing a case that we could then walk through as you're talking more about your approach and the book and how it lines that out, that we could use that as an example to walk through. What does that actually look like to integrate EMDR into each of the phases, into the protocol that we're doing to Fidelity?
Okay. We can do that, but question for the two of you, though.
Yeah.
Do you want to do a case that shows or is an example of people doing EMDR simultaneously or separately within the
even
same
as
room?
Jen was asking that question, I think your response is a perfect window into some of the both like apprehension, but also the potential. So to me, it's sort of a spectrum where therapists that are trained in the standard model of EMDR, which assumes, at least in my reading of it, that you're working with one individual. I think that already starts to create this kind of hang up of, are we now just doing EMDR with two people in one room? So do we have two BLS systems? Are they looking at the same light bar? Like, some of those questions naturally start to come. So I would love maybe for you to tell us what the implications are across that difference kind of spectrum, where you may have scenarios where you're doing one sort of focused processing where both individuals are engaging, or in another circumstance, you have one partner doing reprocessing with BLS and the other is not. But could you walk us through how you see that spectrum?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'll give two general examples, right? So let's just say people with a similar or a same trauma that they went through together, and let's just say a car accident, right? So they had a pretty severe car accident where maybe one suffered a lot of medical stuff, right? There was a lot of injuries, and maybe the other person is okay, but just having a lot of flashbacks or nightmares related to the car accident, right? So they're both coming in, they're both feeling distressed. And so another consideration is like, okay, is this just affecting them individually, or is it affecting their relationship? And so when we're doing couples EMDR, we want to make sure that whatever experiences we target, they are directly linked to how they're reacting with one another.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, it's like childhood trauma that, yes, maybe they need to do their own work on, but not really impacting their relationship, then it doesn't call for the couple's EMDR, right? But okay, let me bring myself back here. So going back to the car accident, that's when, after the history taking, if it seems appropriate, then I would more than likely do EMDR simultaneously with that couple. Okay. Now there's the other scenario where, let's just say, here's an example I can use about myself, right, and my reactions. and it happened recently, and I think it's funny now. And so this is a difference with people that have done some work within themselves. But my husband, I was busily working away, doing my own thing. He shares a wall with me. He's right next door. So he comes in, my door is a little bit open. My door is back there. And he's like, hey, you're not in session. And so for me, as little as that sounded, maybe to the outside world, it's like, he's just asking, like, hey, you're not in session. I took that as, He's micromanaging me. He's trying to control me. Who does he think he is, right? So all of this stuff, I didn't think it in the moment, though. I mean, it was just my process afterwards. And so I turn to him and I say, stop micromanaging me, right? And in a very firm voice. And then he's like, whoa, like I'm just coming here because I saw your door open and I wanted to invite you to lunch.
Oh,
And then all of a sudden my nervous system, regulates itself and I'm like, okay, I'm so sorry. But a couple that has not done any work, that repair process might not happen, right? So the other person might be like, I could have been very defensive, right? Started criticizing him. He could have gone into his own stuff, right? Too, like, okay, I'm not a priority. I'm not important. Um, Nothing I do is good enough, right? So all of those things could have happened if if we didn't have this healthy, good relationship, but it didn't. But I've seen couples where like those little minor incidences do impact the relationship and they get just trapped in this pattern, right? So regardless of all the tools that they use, right, whether they try to do like gentle startup or use any other self-regulation tools like breathing or journaling or getting a drink of water, they just don't work because they're just so flooded, right, with all these emotions that are coming up for them. And so that's when EMDR plays a part, right? So if I was my if I was my own client, does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I probably would have, wanted to know where are these negative beliefs coming from. So, going through all the phases, doing float back, treatment planning, and then going with that, right? And then for, my husband, if he was my client, then I would have also just gone into like, okay, where did you first start feeling like you are important or that you're not good enough? And then doing all of that, all the phase work to get to reprocessing. But that wouldn't be done simultaneously. That would be doing it at different times while the other person is just a compassionate observer. And so the purpose of that would be for the other person to start developing empathy for the other person, right? Because when they're reacting to one another, they're not being compassionate towards one another. They're on attack mode, right? And they just want to get their points across. And they're defensive and critical. And I'm going through all the Gottman Four Horsemen here, but
right.
But that's what happens. Stonewalling, right? People shut down, or they just become very contemptuous with one another.
Yeah.
So what I hear is two kind of key considerations, or maybe they're like we're determining your path. Is one, is this a shared experience or is it like a solo individual experience? And the second one being, is this affecting the individual or is it affecting the relational dynamic between the two?
Right.
And from there, you're then determining, is this an individual processing with a compassionate partner, or is this a shared simultaneous processing? Would you say that kind of summarizes that arc of arriving at those first important considerations?
Mm-hmm. That's a very good way of putting it, just all in a nutshell.
All in a nutshell, yeah.
So I don't know where your curiosity lies, Bridger, but mine really comes into the simultaneous processing of shared experience or individual experience, but whatever that impacts the couple. I think that's the place I get the most questions where
Definitely.
It feels like, okay, I think I can navigate the individual processing with a compassionate partner, or I've seen material on that. But what feels like the newer piece in the field is like, how do you do that together? How do you navigate two nervous systems, two experiences, two perceptions, and process simultaneously?
And we can definitely delve into that further.
Yeah, I would love to go with the scenario if you want to keep the car crash idea going, or if you'd rather shift to a different example that incorporates the simultaneous processing.
Let's do the car accident.
Okay.
Yeah. Car crash. That's a good one.
Yeah. Take us through kind of what that would look like for you.
Okay. So phase one. History taking, yes.
Right, here we are at the beginning, yeah.
So couple comes in, And they're both, coming in because they've been arguing a lot more. They're, let's just say, presenting problems, right? Their intimacy has decreased. They're avoiding one another. They feel misunderstood, right? So surface symptoms. So then when we go into the history taking, that's when they share, well, we recently had a car accident, let's just say 3 months ago, right? So 3 months ago, we had this car accident where, let's just say the one partner was hospitalized, and maybe suffered a lot of injuries and now continue to have a lot of physical pain or chronic pain after that accident. And then the other partner is feeling a lot of guilt and shame because of what led to that car accident,
Mm-hmm.
right? So they both share their perspectives and what that has been causing since then. Of course, you want to see how the relationship was before. That was also very important to assess. Were they in a good place, or were they already having some of these issues, and maybe like this distressing or traumatic experience exasperated the symptoms that they were already struggling with? So which would you like to go with? Were they in a good relationship prior to the accident, or or
Yeah,
not so good relationship?
I think for me, just for the purposes of the illustration, assuming it's a regular kind of relationship where they're in a similar or, somewhat good place, and then they have this event and then all these things come from it. Because I think the more details you add in that pretext, the more what we would call enactments are going to happen, that car accident just now created a singular point that all of that could be blamed on. And so it's very difficult at times, at least in my experience, to get couples to even acknowledge that some of this was happening before this shared experience. But I think for the purpose of this example, let's just keep it as they were a averagely content, happy relationship that then had this incident.
Okay, perfect. Simplifies things.
Right.
All right. So then, let's see. So let's go into, so the way that I keep couples from imposing like their perspectives, especially when we're doing the float back, right, exercise to gather what their, what comes up. So, I mean, just for the purpose of this example though, so I have both of them with a piece of paper and a writing utensil, right? So it could be pen, marker, whatever it is that you have, and make sure that they each have it ready to go before you do the float back. So you bring them back to that experience, right? So for both of them, they're both thinking in their mind, but then you prompt them to write out what comes up for them, right? So let's just say that the worst part, right, for the partner that feels a lot of shame and guilt, right? So their negative belief, right? You've determined that their negative cognition is I gosh, I'm just trying to think of an example that I had. I I messed up, right? I messed up. And so and then, okay, what's coming up in your body? I feel a lot of tension in my chest. Okay, and what are the emotions coming up? Oh, I feel a lot of guilt and shame. Okay, so let your mind float back to that event and what comes up as being the worst part, right? And so the worst part is maybe not the car accident, but before that, maybe that partner had too much to drink and they still chose to drive,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay, so then they're jotting all of this down though. Okay, so they're not verbalizing it to you in that moment. It's afterwards when you complete the float back with each of them in that process that they're writing it out. That then you collect the pieces of paper and this is for you, right? So that they don't impose one another's um, stuff onto one another.
Yeah.
Then the other person might be like, well, they also go through their negative cognition of I am not safe, right? I'm not safe. I can't and I can't trust. So then the emotion is fear, and body sensation is, I don't know, let's just say a lot of anxiety and panic coming up. And so then they do their float back and they determine that the worst part is the part afterwards. Maybe it's not even during any like the actual accident, but it's just afterwards that they can't trust their partner anymore, right? So it's a trust issue. Okay, so let's pause there before I get my brain tangled here.
Yeah.
With this scenario. So any questions or anything that you feel like I missed?
Well, I feel a desire for a bit more detail of, as you're directing the couple to engage in this exercise, are you providing context or informing them of exactly like what you're going for with this? Or are you just saying, here's your writing utensils. I want to now guide both of you at the same time through this process. I just want you to jot down what comes up. We won't share while you're writing it, and then we'll check in after.
Right. So I am giving them those directions beforehand so that they're prepared and they know what to expect. So that's a good point. So I did skip that part, but it should be implemented so that they're not confused, right? So a lot of the times our clients, even individual clients with the EMDR process, are like, what do you tell me to do? Right. So illustrating what's to come for the client is very important. So I have already prompted my clients at this point, right? And so I say clients, but when you're treating couples, the couple relational system is the client.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And when you do your float back, are you having them float back to previous experiences where they have held that same negative belief, emotion, and sensation, and like we would in like a history taking float back with an individual? Is that something you're doing with them as a couple, or just staying focused on that one shared experience?
Well, I mean, that also is a consideration to take. So because for the purpose of this example, just to simplify it, since this couple didn't report having problems before their relationship and that the symptoms started after this event, then I would just focus on the car accident.
Okay.
Yeah. To me, that would be kind of like a restricted processing. We're not necessarily wanting to go into things before this. Let's keep it kind of focused on this.
It's just like, especially, or even just with couples that maybe weren't doing so well before, let's just say, the car accident. I would still, this is like the event that prompted them. So I'd still want to still target the car accident. And if anything, if any other symptoms still are coming up, then we'd explore any other historical stuff that is previous to that car accident.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. So with the couple, we've got our float back now completed there. That's where we are. So do you then invite them both to share what came up for them in the process of that float back?
Yes. So afterwards, after I just review it myself, I ask them, right? You ask for their pieces of paper, you review it, make sure everything, I mean, that there's not anything that could disturb the other person, right? So that's another risk of doing EMDR with couples is that it might be hard for one another to hear each other in their own process, right? And what's coming up for them, even during the history taking or the treatment planning, right? So you want to always be mindful about what is going on with each person and be very observant, because they might not talk about it, but us being very in tune with our clients, we can tell if they're becoming distressed. So back to your question, yes. So then let's just say that everything is okay. I invite them to share with one another what came up and see if they have any questions before we move forward.
Yeah, I like that buffer. You think about the vulnerability that exists in the space of a couple, But if this were just conversational and not writing it down, there might be a lot of filtering that goes on, or, modifying what's being said, but the opportunity to more authentically express through writing, and then have that buffer where you're kind of checking in and saying, does this feel safe to the work or our intention today? And if not, then there can be a more, gentle approach of determining, like, when is the right time to share this, or how do we go about sharing it? Yeah. Okay, so where do you go from there?
So from there, let's just say we're good to go. We get done with the treatment planning, history taking, so we're clear in that regard. We move into phase 2, preparation phase. Yes?
Yeah.
All right. How do you prepare a couple, right? And so for this section, when I do my training, I encourage people to start applying tools that they already practice with their own couples therapy approach, right? So for me, this is when I go into all the great communication skills that Gottman offers, or also when a person is flooded, per my Gottman lens. So a person is flooded, what can they do to emotionally regulate? So that could be so even with breathing, right? So let me rewind a little bit here. So when working with couples, you're teaching them what they can do individually, but also what they can do to to bring each other down as well, right? To work as a team. And so that could be as simple as doing breathing exercises together, or practicing communication tools, not when they're flooded, but also, when they're in a calm, relaxed phase. Let's see what other, or walking together, going on walks together. That's great. BLS, right? Butterfly tapping together. Safe and calm place. Yes, they can have their individual safe and calm place, or they could also work in session with you on establishing a safe and calm place that is just for the couple, right? This could be a positive memory that they have of one another when they felt the happiest, right? Or excited about one another. So that's also very, very valuable for couples that I have incorporated the safe and calm place with. And anything else, right? So anything else that people incorporate. I know, like, some people do some polyvagal exercises, some somatic exercises where people are more in tune with their body. They have them both stand up. Also, tapping on one another is a good one as well, teaching the couples to do that with one another for calming and grounding. Yeah, so just some ideas.
Yeah, this is making me think back to the retreats we used to do together, because I was teaching a lot of polyvagal regulation skills at the time, just to help each partner feel like when that activation emerges, one, can we even sense that it's coming up instead of being like this light switch? I see a lot of couples have this. Well, all of a sudden we were both just like terrible, but we're not spotting this rise in activation or this distress. So that is a really excellent resource in my practice of just helping them notice when they're starting to heat up or cool off, and how can they come back together. But then in the context of when we're back as a couple, how can we show those skills still here as well, not just as an individual, but back in the context of the couple?
Yeah.
How do you learn to apply it for the purposes of the relationship, right? So
Right.
any individual work that they are able to really get a handle on can definitely have like a direct positive effect, right, on the relationship when it comes to resourcing and grounding.
Yeah, I really, really like the emphasis on the like co-regulation aspects. How do we partner in this to like find calm, grounded together? We each have our individual, independent ways of doing that, but can we add in that lens of like, what's it look like to join and have that be a shared experience? That feels like, aside from EMDR, that alone is such a resource and like a positive moment for couples to encounter that it seems like at the point of entering into therapy, those are rare. It's like either we're in conflict or we're going our separate ways to find our independent regulation. But I think that emphasis on co-regulation is so powerful in couples work.
Yeah. The co-regulation is definitely very important for them to learn that they do have that available, right, for the relationship, right? So a lot of the times when we think about internal resources, right, we think just about ourselves, right? But these internal resources can also be about the couples and what are their internal resources. And then there's the external resources that it's healthy to have your own external resources as well, but what are they doing together outside, right? Of just that, are they going to social activities together? Are they playing tennis together? Are they, I don't know, in a book club together,
Right.
whatever that is, right? That provides like that peaceful environment for them. It's about reminding them. Sometimes they don't even know that they're already doing it. So it's about highlighting what they are already doing together that is good for them and healthy for them. And that can help strengthen their relationship, but also help with their process, right? So because EMDR, as we know, is not easy, right? If a client comes in saying, well, I mean, sometimes they feel really good, but I mean, they're opening up a big box of like yucky stuff, right? So it's not, so if they're not feeling good during that process, then that means that good work is happening. That's what couples, you're doing a good job, right? And so of course we have to make sure that they are not escalated when they leave our room, but they need to be able to close up that box of yuckiness until the next time. But it's okay, right? So they need to be able to know that it's not just about regulating themselves during the sessions, but outside, what can they do, especially when they're going through this together. So that is one concern that some couples do have. They're like, okay, so we're both doing EMDR, right? It's already hard enough, like you hear individuals saying, how should I prepare my loved one, right, about my EMDR process and what to expect and how can they be a support to one another. But in this instance, both of them are doing EMDR. So how are they going to support one another when they're both going through that process? And that's what you're trying to teach in phase 2 and preparing them for that.
Yeah, I appreciate just how transparent the language is. And I find that that's a real resource in itself to the therapeutic process when we can talk about this isn't just kind of pie in the sky idealism. Now, we did this EMDR session, you're going to go home and it's all going to be taken care of. Like, no, you're still going to go home and face some of the same trigger moments or get, upset with each other. So let's talk about that really practically and kind of face it directly here to help you see just how these resources can generalize and give you some opportunities to try that out.
Yep. And so once couples hear that, and they start feeling like better about the process, they're like, okay, it's not that, yes, like things will come up, but there's a way to manage,
right?
And we're not going to be two dysregulated people, always at each other's throats all of a sudden. Worse, right? Because a lot of people are like, we're going to be a lot worse than what we came in with, right? And I'm like, well, actually, the difference is that now when either you're getting reminded about the tools and resources you already have, or two, you're going to learn new tools to utilize so that you can manage when things do come up.
So if we were kind of take maybe phases 3 through 7 together as like reprocessing and doing that simultaneous reprocessing, what does that look like in this example?
Yes, so simultaneous reprocessing. So I have a variety of gadgets in my office. And I know I've been talking about in person too, but I also do telehealth. So we didn't talk about that, but let's just keep it.
Yeah.
I can do it telehealth, but let's keep it in person. So I have have you guys heard of the IMO?
No.
EIMO. Can I grab it to show
Oh
you?
yeah, that would be great.
That. Yeah.
It's back here. So I also have my light bar, and I have my Okay. So this is an IMO.
Oh,
That is
that's
cool.
I've seen one of them before. I didn't know that that's what it was called.
EYMO. I think I'm pronouncing it okay.
So it's almost like for those who are maybe listening and not seeing, it looks to me like a wooden canoe, like a little, just about a couple feet long with,
Rubber marbles in
yeah,
them?
a little bit larger than marbles, but they're rolling back and forth as she's tipping it left and right.
Yeah, so I don't keep all the marbles in there. And there's bouncy ones for those that are a little bit more sensitive to like sound and they're like, "Oh my God, it's too much." So what I like about this is that they control it themselves. So either it could be tactile because as the marble or the little ball bounces, they get that BLS. So you can see there, or they can do eye movements.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
That's super cool. We're going to have a bunch of those around Beyond here before too long.
And also, if people do use the harder marble, it's also audio BLS.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's one option I have. So I don't the light bar. So I present all of these options before we begin reprocessing. So I also have my buzzies here, yes,
Yep.
and my light bar, and I also what is it called? You know,
the butterfly. Yeah.
Or tapping. Trying to think if there's any other creative ones that I use. Well, I'll just keep it simple for today. So I give them all those options. So they each pick their preferred way, whatever feels right to them. I do try to encourage eye movements as much as possible, but some people, depending on how their eyes are or how goofy they get when they're following the light, then I present them with the other options. So they both, and so let's go back to, okay, so we're going into phase 4 now. Yes. Okay. So
yeah, phase 3, we haven't talked about how it's activated, that assessment. Yeah.
Okay. So then, so they're there and they're ready to go. So we already know that we're target. So we've already done the float back, right? So we know what the worst. So I go with the worst part, especially if it's a recent experience, right? So in this case, I said 3 months, but it's still recent enough just to go with the worst part for them. And it's an experience that we know of, right? So we're not trying to uncover all of these other experiences. So I have them both start off with the car accident, right? And so they have the image of the car accident, what's coming up as being the worst part. And so let's just say for them, it's not necessarily an image, but it's more like I can't trust my partner. And then the other person is like, I did something, I messed up, right? Or I made a big mistake. So it's more of like the negative cognition or belief that has taken, that it's the worst part. So their emotions, as we discussed already, is maybe a lot of fear, feeling unsafe for one. The other person is feeling a lot of guilt and shame. And then I prompt them to, okay, what's coming up in your body? And just notice. And then they start their BLS. So again, I already instructed them what's to happen, right? And what to expect. They already have it in place. And so I control the bussies, they're doing their own tapping, and then I do pause them, right? And I say pause, okay, and just notice. So for this part, depending on the couple. Again, each couple is very unique, but either they can just choose, right, to just notice, right, notice what's coming up emotionally, physically, any new thoughts and images. So as we know already, when doing EMDR, we don't necessarily need to know us therapists, right, the EMDR therapist, what's coming up for them, right, because it's the individual's process. We're there as if they don't share, we're there as an observer, right? We're still there gauging what is going on. So a couple can choose to just notice themselves, but they need to let me know if things is coming up. And if they do a nod and I say, okay, just notice or go with that.
Hmm.
Or if they would like, I just feel like it becomes a little bit more complicated if they need to pause to like write down what's coming up for them. Yes. Or if they feel comfortable, and I guess there's a third option, they are welcome to share what is coming up with them and one another can hear what's coming up for them. And I just say, go with that.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so they're both doing this at the same time with their preferred BLS method. And in this first kind of go, which I want to kind of ask some, okay, as this progresses and you start to see affect rise up in them, how do you attune to both of them? But let's just kind of keep it right here at this initial BLS set. And in that, you're having them choose based on the directions you've already given before reprocessing began to either just notice to themselves, to write it down, or to verbally communicate it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Okay. So, and I imagine as long as things are parallel progressing and moving smoothly through, we just kind of continue in that, like, just notice that, notice what comes up, go with that, notice what comes up. What about when they start to kind of find themselves at a different point in the path? So there's like a stuck point for one, or there's new adaptive insight for one, but not the other, or a new emergence of like affect for one, but not the other. How do you navigate those diverging paths?
Mm-hmm. So so just rewinding a little bit. So I do let them know that that might happen, right? So they're two different individuals. And let me see, can you still hear me?
Yeah.
Yes.
Lost your video. Hold on one second. Okay. Am I frozen?
Nope,
Nope.
we got you.
Okay, perfect. And so I let them know that that's a possibility. So when I do notice that happening, where all of a sudden one is here, the other is here, I just pause, right, and then just kind of focus on one, just to have more dedicated attention to what's coming up for that one individual, while the other person becomes an observer for that moment, right? Because maybe for them, let's just say nothing is coming up for them, right? They're like, I'm good, right? And so we do it again, still nothing. Other person still has stuff coming up. And so I just say, okay, let's pause there. I either, maybe the other person wants to take a quick break, but I could still continue the work with the one individual until they're also, nothing is coming up, which may or may not happen during that session. Maybe it has to carry on to the next session, but in that case, I guess the other person becomes the observer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there's really is, I mean, there's a lot of layers happening in the process, but you could kind of shift in and out of a focus of it being an individual processing versus that simultaneous processing. I'm curious, from the experience of the couple, is there a point at which there's like a syncing back up or a moment of clarity or understanding where it benefits each other that this is happening simultaneously? Or why wouldn't we just do these individually for each of these partners? Like, what's the benefit to the couple in that dynamic that this is happening simultaneously?
So when it's happening simultaneously, or even just talking about a couple's EMDR, just in general, whether it's like in this simultaneous case that we're discussing, or different traumas, I think the benefit is that both of them feel like they are doing the work, and not that it's not happening in just in regular couples counseling, but a lot of the times, one partner might feel like they're the ones with the problem, right? Or the one that's messed up after this, I'm using very casual terms here, but that it's just messed up after like this distressing experience that they had. And so when they're both doing EMDR simultaneously, they feel like they're not alone.
Okay.
Right. So it's more like a sense of like, hey, you're in this with me. We're going to work on this together. And it's not just a one-sided problem, but it's a problem that both of us are facing, and we both need to do work. Maybe one does need to do a little bit more work than the other, and that's okay. But at least they feel like they're united in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the things with this case that my conceptualization mind is just kind of running with, of trying to imagine what might be coming up for each of the partners as the reprocessing is unfolding. And it was highlighting a point that's come up in my couples sessions many times, where the negative cognition of one is almost given more proof that it needs to be there by what the partner starts sharing. So for this couple, the individual that's feeling the guilt and shame that I messed up, I made a mistake, starts hearing in real time that other partner saying, yeah, you did mess up and you got me injured in all of this. Or, you start hearing confirmation of that negative cognition, and that needs some attunement and adjustment for the three of us to make together. But I'm curious how you respond to stuff like that as it starts to come up.
That's a good question. Well, I think, like if that is happening, right? So if for the other person, it's just kind of like serving as I can see that happening actually. So yeah, serving as affirming that their negative belief is true, right? And that we don't want that to happen. But a reframe to that is pausing, right? And we go back to like, how we can move around our phases. So we go backwards a little bit to phase 2. And so there I let them know, how can I frame this? So I educate them by them being able to own and take responsibility for their action, right? They're not blaming it on anything else. That in itself is a win. So I reframe it as a win in the fact that the other person is able to own that they did mess up, right? And it's not that they're trying to deviate blame or take away the fact that let's just say they drank too much. It's like, I really messed up. Right. And so they are genuinely sorry for what they did. So with that reframe, right. And so we, that by the other partner being able to hear that, then also that helps with the way that they're framing it in their mind. They're like, of course, my partner made a mistake, and it was not their intention to do that, and they are sorry, right? So they develop that compassion to the other person, as opposed to holding this I made a mistake against them, right? So it's that shift, right, that EMDR does, right? So it moves into a more adaptive way of thinking about the experience, as opposed to the maladaptive way, right? But I can see how like the other person could just get stuck and be looping there, right? And so that's when, so I say reframing, but I mean it's a cognitive interweave there, right? So that you're doing and helping the client get unstuck when if it were to happen.
Yeah, I think a lot of the couple's history is going to come into play with that, where is the statement of you did mess up a global appraisal of that person to you, or is that a time-specific comment of that instance in that moment, you did mess up, you had too much to drink and you chose to drive. But that's where the interweave can be the time-specific nature of the action, and disconnecting that from who that person is as a couple or a partner in the couple. That does it feel true to say in that moment you messed up, but that's not who you are? And to that other individual, does that feel true to you, that in that moment they messed up, but that's not who you know them to be?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yes, just being able to find like um, other experiences where they didn't mess up, right? Where they
Right.
did the right thing, and reminding them about those instances as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, as you were talking about that interweave of seeing them take responsibility and acknowledge and repair in the relationship, could that then be a new disconfirming experience to the other partner that says, maybe I can't trust you? You're not blaming or dismissing this, but you're holding appropriate responsibility. Like maybe that trust could be rebuilt.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I want to recapture a couple of things you said that feel really important to name again. But the benefits of doing this couples work in this way is the I'm not alone. We're in this together. We're both showing up willing and open to be vulnerable, self-explore, and do really hard work for the benefit of the relationship. There's a development of compassion through doing it together, each person getting to be witness to and a part of, and like right alongside their partner going through this kind of processing. I feel like EMDR allows us to access more vulnerable, deep experiences that when we're just in like a cognitive processing space, we have all this narrative kind of clouding the depth of what we're holding around these experiences. So I love that, like compassion development, empathy development, seeing another perspective by hearing what your partner, how they're seeing this and experiencing and what they're holding in it. Those feel like two really powerful benefits just to kind of, land the plane here around why would we choose to do this? Because it's a lot. As you're describing, I'm imagining there's like so many things you're holding and navigating, but I think there's so much vulnerability and connection that is possible if you're able to and have the courage, if the couple has the courage to go to this space together.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I like that you just said having the courage to go into this space, because it is difficult, right, to show that vulnerability,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's already, like even doing individual EMDR is challenging, but to do it with your partner in the room, it's like, okay, like it really takes a lot of courage and courage and just a lot of strength to be able to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I do comment on that, for couples when they're going back and forth on if they should or if they shouldn't. But, illustrating just like the potential benefits, I think a lot of people find hope, right? Like, okay, we can go back to how we were before,
Yeah.
especially if they didn't have any issues prior to, right? And so this is a case that we're presenting on, but it's a lot of good work, and I think a lot of couples can see so much benefit more quickly, right, if they do the EMDR together. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was really glad the conversation went this direction because this is like the juicy, exciting stuff to me. But I want to name in your book that you reference like ethics and important boundaries and important considerations for safety. Not that those aren't fun things to talk about, but if our listeners are interested in more around that, because this is delicate, I think that there is more information about those pieces of how do we do this in a really safe, ethical, cautious way with couples. But it was fun to not have to get lost in all of that while we talk about what's possible. It's really exciting.
Arilda, I'm curious. Obviously, this couple, would have their own unique needs depending on what comes up in the reprocessing. And so, not to keep trying to just make up scenarios, but do you feel like there would be anything important for the listeners to understand about what installation and closure looks like for couples from a simultaneous processing kind of standpoint? Because again, I think as you see an individual work, the negative cognition change or the positive cognition, change over the course of reprocessing. So I kind of want to just tie the whole thing together of hearing from you kind of what installation and closure looks like with obviously the post-processing and follow-up.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's just say that everything is clear, for both of them. Yay, we made it to that point. We checked back, and so with me talking so much, I forgot to identify the potential positive cognition. But let's just say positive cognition is I feel safe for one partner. I can trust my partner. The other person might be I I made I made a mistake, but I learned from this experience. Let's just say that, right? Or it won't happen again. Or can you guys think of another good positive cognition for the other partner?
Yeah, I think for me, it'd be maybe something like, I made a mistake, but I'm committed, or I'm trying my best. I love you. I'm trying to get better.
Yeah. So then they both have their positive cognition, and so we, measure VOC. So let's just say it's at a 5 or 6, right? Like I'm giving them a really high number, but I think they could be there. So we install it simultaneously. So each of them are aware of their positive cognition. The validity is almost at a 7, not quite there. So we install, finally get it maybe to a 6, 7. Of course, if it's not at a 7, you want to gather information as to what's keeping it from the 7. And so once you do that, it's okay to move on. And then we get into the body scan. It's really nice to see the body scan happen, especially because I notice a change, right? Because I'm thinking couples that come into the couch, initially they come in sitting like apart. But as the reprocessing continues, they start sitting closer and closer together. And so it almost like naturally comes where when they're doing the body scan, they will hold like their hands or just be very like cuddly on the sofa. And so a lot of the times their body scan is clear. Like if anything, they feel comfort with one another, and they feel safe and good. And that's it. And then they go on and be a happy couple again.
And we'll see how it goes.
And they walk off into the sunset.
That's right. Still holding hands. Exactly.
As all good training videos end.
Exactly.
And then of course they come back for the follow-up session, and that's phase 8, and then you just check in to see how they're doing. There might be stuff that came up during the week. Tend to that if it does come up. I know. See, I'm rushing again, but then or maybe they're good, and you're like, okay, this is great. Like where you can reassess and see if there's anything else that you could potentially target, or maybe you're done, especially if it's like an isolated incident like this, like a car accident that they were both present for, and maybe that's all they needed to work on. So that'll be it.
One of the examples from my own caseload that's been coming up throughout this conversation, just to highlight, we just gave a single incident shared experience example. So that's sort of the most neat, simple example of what this couple's work could look like. And there's obviously a really long spectrum where the couple could have had a long history of some really challenging circumstances, or there could be things like infidelity or betrayal kind of trauma coming up. But there was a case that I had where one individual had completed or initiated an affair after the loss of a child. And this was obviously very complex because they wanted to still work it out and be together. And so it wasn't a question of like, are we going to break up or not? But there were so many layers to the pain that it wasn't just the loss of the child. It was also the hoped for family, that they were disconnected in the vision of what that would look like. And if they, what they wanted that to be like. And then when they lost their child and the months of loneliness that set in there and the isolation and separation, that was another focus point. And then there was the seeking out of the affair and the discovery of the affair. So there was sort of like 4 or 5 major points that were on the trauma, timeline that we were looking at. And the history that preceded that, that's where a lot of the moments of goodness where they felt connected before all of this happened, those were a lot of the resources that we used and tried to find new ways of finding that even now in the context of all of this stuff. The container was a big resource for them, just to have my office be the place where they hold this stuff. But really just trying to help them see that hope is possible and that connection is possible. There are moments even now where we feel good and safe and connected together. But to me, that's just an example of a more complex and layered case that I imagine you would have a lot to say just about how that could look in the room.
Mm-hmm. I mean, yeah, I mean, any type of couple can just walk in through your door. It might be a quote unquote simple case. I don't think any case is simple, but
Right.
or it could be like multi-layered, kind of like this couple that you're talking about. So I mean, it would be something if they would have come in together with for the loss of their child, right? That could have been like you could have done EMDR just on that, right? And it could have been simultaneous. But then on top of that was infidelity.
Yeah.
And infidelity is a traumatic experience, especially for the person, the other person that did not commit the infidelity. But I mean, it could also be very distressing for the person that did it because a lot of stuff comes up. So it's like the questions that have come up, it's like, well, which trauma do you tend to first? Right.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when you have to see the way that I take those cases. It's like which experience is impacting both clients the most, right? So there you go. I'm not. Yeah, I mean, I always start thinking, and then I start talking, and then I go with the tracks.
For that couple, I had I have a very similar approach in just helping create a treatment plan with the clients of, what of these things that we could be spending our time on feel like they're the most pressing to you right now. And for both of them, it was the loss of the child. As we started to get into that, the affair then would kind of come up. And so we created this sort of teeter-totter kind of space together where we would deal a bit with the worst part of the loss of the child, then deal with the next piece of the affair that would come up. And then we'd go back to working on the loss of the child, then to the next piece of the affair. And we kind of stair-stepped it down that way.
Okay.
Yeah.
And it seemed like it went well.
It did. Yeah. Yeah, it did.
Awesome. Very good.
They don't all go well, but that one did go well.
That's an interesting way of doing it, but I like it. I do like it.
Yeah.
And so whatever you did, it worked. So that's
the point. Yeah.
I think what that case demonstrates, and even we just got to like a fraction of the examples and the possibilities. And we could probably sit on here for the entire day talking about your approach and, the contents of your book and how to apply that. But so this is just scratching the surface or looking at one little piece of it. And I just want to name that, like, I appreciate you going through so thoroughly in this example and knowing how much you had to kind of like
on the
edit
fly.
out or like set aside that would have been helpful context, but just to encourage anyone who is listening, who this is piquing their interest or it feels like, wow, I could actually see this fitting into my practice and I want to hear more of that context. The book is out there. We'll share a link to that in the show notes so that that's an easy find for you all. But also you mentioned a training that you have related to this. I don't know if you want to share anything with our listeners about how to find you or how to find out about your training.
Sure. So the training is listed on my website, Wellness Counseling Inc. And so www.wellnesscounselinginc.com and to the trainings tab. And I do have an upcoming training in January that I have linked on my website, but I'm doing that one through Steve Frankel group. It'll redirect them to the Steve Frankel group. So I'm excited to do it with them. And then I'll probably offer it another time, sometime next year as well.
Okay. Beautiful.
Well, thank you so much for giving your time to us today and to our listeners and sharing about this topic and answering all of our questions and walking through such a detailed case example.
Yeah. We'll hang out after I stop recording just to say our goodbyes, but for the purpose of the recording, thank you for your generosity, Arilda. Appreciate it.
I appreciate you too. Thank you. I appreciate all the questions, and I'm glad that I got some of the information out there.
Yeah.